The landscape of Canadian climate policy is once again defined by a familiar tension between provincial autonomy and federal standards. In Alberta, this dynamic is currently centered on the price of carbon for its largest industrial emitters. The provincial government recently made a significant move. It announced a decision to freeze its industrial carbon price at $95 per ton, a rate that will hold steady through the year 2026. This action was framed as a necessary measure to protect the province's economic engine, particularly its vital oil and gas sector. The freeze is designed to provide stability and predictability for industries that are competing on a global stage, where such costs are not always a factor. However, this provincial decision creates a direct conflict with the federal government's own climate framework. In a surprising turn, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has since indicated that this frozen price is not necessarily set in stone. Following a recent meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney in Ottawa, she stated that the $95 per ton figure remains open for discussion. This comment has opened a narrow window for negotiation, suggesting that the province may be willing to adjust its position. Premier Smith maintains that Alberta's current approach strikes a crucial balance, making it viable for industry while still encouraging the necessary private investment in green technology to lower emissions over the long term. The Premier's overture comes at a critical juncture. The meeting with Prime Minister Carney was described by both leaders as surprisingly productive, with Smith noting she found unprecedented common ground with the new Prime Minister. This newfound spirit of cooperation could be a pivotal factor in resolving the carbon pricing standoff. The discussions are not happening in a vacuum. They are part of a much larger and more complex negotiation involving pipeline projects, emissions caps, the overall future of energy development in Canada. The Premier's willingness to even discuss the carbon price signals a potential shift from confrontation to collaboration, though the path forward remains fraught with challenges. At its core, the situation presents a fundamental question about how Canada will pursue its climate goals. Should policy prioritize immediate economic competitiveness, even if it means a slower pace of emissions reduction? Or should a stringent, nationally consistent price on pollution be enforced to drive rapid decarbonization, despite the risks to specific industries? The conversation between Alberta and Ottawa is not merely about a number, $95 versus a higher federal price, but about the underlying philosophy of environmental regulation. The outcome will have profound implications, not just for Alberta's economy, but for the credibility and effectiveness of Canada's entire climate action plan, setting a precedent for federal-provincial relations for years to come. The divergence in carbon pricing stems from two distinct and conflicting policy paths. Alberta's chosen price for its large industrial emitters is set at $95 per ton. This rate is part of a provincially designed system called the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Regulation. The system is a form of cap and trade, where facilities are given emissions benchmarks. If they pollute less than their benchmark, they can generate credits to sell. If they pollute more, they must buy credits. If they pollute more, they must pay the carbon price. By freezing the price at $95, Alberta argues it is shielding its industries from escalating costs that could hamper their ability to compete. In stark contrast stands the federal government's carbon pricing backstop. This is a national minimum standard that all provincial systems are expected to meet. For the upcoming year, this federal backstop price is set to climb to $110 per ton. If a provincial system is not stringent enough, the federal government can impose its own program. Yet Ottawa has been hesitant to enforce it, even after Saskatchewan eliminated its industrial carbon price entirely, creating significant ambiguity. Support for Alberta's decision to freeze its industrial carbon price is strong within the province's business community, particularly from the oil and gas sector. Industry leaders cite competitiveness. Their primary argument centers on competitiveness. As the Canadian carbon price rises, it places domestic companies at a disadvantage versus firms without equivalent costs. An ever-increasing carbon tax can drive investment and potentially jobs to regions with less stringent environmental regulations. Leaders argue for a system that supports multi-billion-dollar projects, carbon capture, utilization, storage. However, environmental organizations and climate policy experts warn that a lower and less certain carbon price chills needed decarbonization investment. The Canadian Climate Institute has warned of massive uncertainty from Alberta's policy adjustments. Dave Sawyer told Parliament that weakening the price signal could push future credit prices down, perhaps as low as $65 per ton. Such a low price undermines the business case for cleaner technologies. This creates a paradox for investors. Major projects need a strong and reliable incentive, which a higher carbon price can provide by raising the cost of continued pollution. As of today, October 8, 2025, the standoff over Alberta's industrial carbon price has reached a critical juncture, with several potential outcomes looming on the horizon. The path forward will be determined in the coming weeks and months, shaped by negotiations between the provincial and federal governments and the broader political pressures each leader faces. For businesses, investors, and environmental advocates alike, the immediate future is defined by this uncertainty. All eyes are on Ottawa and Edmonton. The Premier's self-imposed Grey Cup deadline in mid-November suggests movement soon. First, a negotiated settlement. Premier Smith's softer tone and Prime Minister Carney's collaborative rhetoric suggest a deal is possible. Alberta could raise its carbon price toward the federal benchmark over time, perhaps in exchange for federal concessions on a pipeline or regulatory flexibility for the oil and gas emissions cap. Both leaders could claim victory. Markets would gain some certainty. Second, federal enforcement. If talks break down, Ottawa could declare Alberta non-equivalent and trigger the federal backstop, pushing the price to $110 per ton and risking a jurisdictional fight.